Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our second free training session of the day. This one is for Fusion 360 from Autodesk. So firstly, thank you very much for joining us this morning from wherever you are, be it a makeshift office, makeshift homeschooling, or whatever it might be. Obviously very uncertain times at the moment with what's going on with COVID-19. But as part of that, we're all in this together. We're in the same situation, and we at Man and Machine wanted to give something back, especially to the student community and those of you that are not able to attend college or university, or whatever it might be. So a brief introduction as to what we're doing here today is we're running a free training course over the next 10 weeks, every Monday morning for half an hour. On two professional grade applications. So we've already done Autodesk Revit this morning, which is for the design of buildings, and now we're doing the same thing for Autodesk Fusion 360, which is a manufacturing tool, a manufacturing parametric CAD tool. So the idea behind these sessions really is to get you up and running if you are new to CAD in either construction or manufacturing. And try and really hit the ground running and use these softwares as quickly as we can. So a couple of things at first. If you're a student, you can get access to these softwares free of charge. Head over to Google and do a little search for Autodesk Education or Autodesk Students, and you'll find the education community where you can log in with your academic email address and download the software for the period of your education, completely free of charge. So that goes really nicely hand in hand with these sessions that we're running. And all these sessions, they're half an hour each. They're nice and quick, fast sessions that go through enough, but not too much to make them overwhelming. And hopefully by spreading them out over a week at a time, certainly once we're into session 2 and 3 and 4, which are a little bit more in depth, you'll have enough time in between to play around with them, then come back and learn a bit more, play around with them. And that's really the idea, is us as an Autodesk partner who sell Autodesk software, who sell our training services, is really to give something back to the community. So hopefully you find this useful. And today, this morning, we're focusing on Fusion 360. So without further ado, let's just minimize that and open up Fusion 360. So a little intro to what this application is, first of all. So Fusion 360 is, I say, relatively new on the scene, certainly if you compare it to the likes of Autodesk Inventor or AutoCAD, which have been around for many, many years. Fusion 360 is relatively new, but that doesn't mean that the software is any less capable than those other high-end manufacturing CAD systems. This is a professional grade manufacturing parametric modeling and design application that does allow you to go as far as digital prototyping. What does that mean? Well, it means that we can firstly model our ideas of our product designs digitally on a digital workspace. We can then simulate them to see how they'll perform in reality, whether that's some basic stress analysis to say, do you know what, I want to put some weight on something to see how it will react and how the materials will bend, through to even higher end simulation looking at generative design, where we might look at how we've designed something and how we can use additive machining or additive 3D printing to really try and hone that design down and make it as lightweight whilst keeping its strength as possible. All the way through to manufacturing. So Fusion also has CAM software built in, computer-aided manufacturing, meaning that as well as designing your model and simulating your model, you can also put toolpaths on it and get it to a point where something can actually be manufactured. And over the next 10 weeks, we're going to be taking you guys through every single step, from how to design a part to how to put that part into an assembly and make a series of components, through to simulating those components, manufacturing those components with some basic CNC toolpaths, through to getting an output on a manufacturing drawing so that we can go ahead and manufacture the thing. So that's the idea. All short sessions from myself and my team at Man and Machine. In our makeshift offices. Again, we are all in this together. So let's just start. And to do that, I just want to open up a sample file. So The idea of this first session is really to introduce the scene and really to get your head around the application, its many different interfaces and buttons and what they do. We're not going to be drawing anything, we're not going to be making any selections as such. It's really just to talk you through the interface to begin with. So what I'm going to do just for this session, first of all, don't worry too much about what I'm doing at this particular point in time. I'm just going to open up a model. We'll come back to that other interface in a second, because I want to show you that what we have inside of Fusion is a very sophisticated 3D CAD modeling application first and foremost, with all of the other bits and pieces bolted on, as I say, through your professional grade simulation, computer-aided manufacturing, whether it's 3-axis, multi-axis, 5-axis, so on and so forth. So we have something that is capable of modeling single parts all the way up to multiple part assemblies with detail as necessary. And by the end of this 10-week course, we're going to get to a point where we get an output. So step one is to talk you through the interface and try and explain how it works, why it works, where the different buttons are, and what you might use them for. So the reason I've opened up this particular file or a file is just to have something on the screen first and foremost, and then we'll strip it back and start talking about different areas. So let's literally take the interface and split it up into chunks. Sometimes these professional grade tools are a little bit daunting when you first open them, mainly because there's so many different buttons and different tool sets and different areas that you might not be used to seeing, especially if you're coming from something like a 2D AutoCAD or an AutoCAD Mechanical, which are great applications, but sort of flat or at least semi-vertical if you're using AutoCAD Mechanical. Whereas this is a fully 3D system where you are developing in and around a 3D object. So it's very important that you understand the different buttons and what they do. So we're going to start right at the top left, and we're literally going to work our way down. So firstly, very top left of your application, you've got the ability to turn on and off your data panel. Now, the first thing to explain about Fusion is it's a cloud-based application. That doesn't mean it runs in the cloud. I very much have Fusion installed on my laptop. But all of its data, by default, is stored in the cloud. That means it's very easy to collaborate, communicate, and share designs across different companies or individuals within your team. So everything that we are saving and opening through Fusion works through this Fusion Hub. And that Fusion Hub can have multiple people assigned to it with different permission sets. It can have different projects with different people assigned to them, different folders, and then lots of different individual files. So that means that everything that we can see within this area is actively being driven or pulled from the cloud. We've got lots of different functionality with regards to data management through that hub, which we'll talk about as this course progresses over the next 10 weeks, like version control, like sharing that file with someone to comment on or review, so on and so forth. But for today, all you need to understand is that everything you'll do, whether it's saving a new design or opening something that's existing, is it's all driven directly through this Fusion Hub. Okay? So we can open it and close it using this button on the left-hand side to either show or hide that data panel. Okay. Most people hide it when it's not in use, mainly because it gives us a little bit more real estate on our screen and more area of which we can focus on our model. Moving to the right, we then have, I guess you could call it your quick access toolbar like you would have in Inventor or AutoCAD or Revit, but it's typically much smaller. So firstly, we have a file drop down. So this is a typical file menu like you would see in Adobe or inside of Word or Excel. And this allows us to do several things like create a new design, for example. That might be a new standard design or a new drawing for if it's a 2D construction drawing. We might be opening an existing design that we want to be able to work on. We might also be doing some things like exporting. So from time to time, you might want to export something to share with someone outside of Fusion. You might want to export something out to do a 3D print. All of these kind of options are available through the file menu. So we can come in here and choose any of those pretty traditional tools that we have within inside of a file menu first and foremost. And we'll talk about the relevant ones later on in the course that you will and won't use. We have a save button, obviously saves, as well as undo and redo buttons on there. But for that quick access toolbar, that's kind of it. Most of this is very straightforward. The interface is as simple as it needs to be. If we work a little bit more to the right hand side, we have a great big tab, and this tab will get smaller dependent on how many different files we have open. Works a bit like a web browser with all the different tabs in Chrome or Edge, whatever it is that you're using, whereas at the moment I only have one file open, this bike frame v1. If I either say File, New Design, or if I press the little tab over on the right hand side here, it will create a new design, and you'll see then we have two tabs. One that has geometry and data, and one that doesn't have anything because it's a new design. Those can be closed off and reopened as necessary. So we can go through and we can have multiple tabs open to work on different files. We can close them, work on them, add new ones on the fly. It works very naturally, and it's kind of something that we're all used to doing, especially with, pretty much most applications out there being tab-based right now. If we move further to the right-hand side, we have some other options. So Fusion 360 does have some extensions, both free and paid for. We can access those through the extensions button. We have some job statuses, so things that you'll learn later on in this course, like some of the simulation functionality, for example, allows you to do some very high-end simulation, which you might not have a powerful enough machine to do, or you might not want your machine to sit there clunking away for hours on end. So you can send a job to the cloud to be processed by a load of servers. It's quicker, and therefore it gives you a job status in order to do that. We then have our user area, where if we click on our name, we can access our Autodesk account, we can access our Fusion 360 preferences, as well as our profile to be able to identify who we're logged in as, for example, from a licensing perspective. And we have lots of different preferences that we can choose, most of them, to be honest with you, are personal preference. Take some time to have a look around there and see what kind of settings that you want to have. We also have a help. If we single click left mouse button on the help, it would obviously open up the Fusion help. But that section on the top is kind of all your file menu, your help, and the different components or files that we have open. If we look underneath that, we have a great big long menu, and that's called our ribbon bar. The ribbon in Windows now for a number of years has been pretty generic. You get it in Word, Excel, PowerPoint. Pretty much most Windows-based applications, for the most part, are now ribbon-based. So rather than having all of these old drop-downs, edit, tools, help, so on and so forth, you just have a great big ribbon bar with all of the different tools on. It makes it really nice to work with, and it actually makes it very easy to find the tools that you're after. So I would say that the ribbon bar in Fusion has kind of several main sections, if you like, but I kind of treat it as two areas. First and foremost, we have an environment selector or a workspace selector. And what this allows you to do using that drop-down is we can see all of the different areas inside of Fusion 360, and by selecting one of those areas, you'll get a different set of tools appear in your ribbon. So this is where we can say that we want to go ahead and do some 2D drawings, or we want to go ahead and do some finite element analysis simulation, or do some 3D rendering. And based on choosing one of those, you'll get a completely different interface on the ribbon with lots of different tools. Because we currently have the design one selected, all of my tools are design based. So I have the ability to do some solid modeling where I can create 2D sketches such as a box, for example, or a square, and extrude that up to make it a box. We have some surface modeling tools or some freeform modeling tools if someone wants to push and pull a mesh or a component to make an object that's a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. We have some sheet metal tools. And obviously, depending on which one you select, you get a load of different icon sets available to you. So under the solid modeling, you get tools that you would expect to see on your solid modeling. Each one of these, if you hover over for a couple of seconds, gives you a tooltip which explains with a bit of text and an image exactly what's going on with that tool, how it works, what you should or shouldn't use it for. And that's the same across the board. It makes it very easy for a new user, such as the people on this session, to pick this up and start identifying, okay, well, what tool do I need to use for this? Or what's that tool for? I can't quite remember. So we can come in and really identify different tools, what they're used for, and the kind of results it will give you. And everything becomes, completely straightforward. Because if I want to do a sheet metal component, I would start with a sketch, and then I would put some flanges in there to bend the metal up to give me a bent shape, which would then obviously be flattened to get cut and then get bent on a machine. Whereas if I'm working with solid modeling, I start with a sketch and then I use features to push it up, pull it around, rotate it, revolve it, so on and so forth. Don't forget that you have drop downs. All of these have additional options available to you. So yeah, have a look through them, identify which ones you will and won't use. But again, throughout the next 10 weeks, we'll be talking through all of the different tools that you'll need to make a basic component. So that's our ribbon bar. If we look underneath our ribbon bar, we kind of have a big white area with a couple of floating windows. And the amount of floating windows will change dependent on what you are or are not doing. So for example, I currently have a completely blank screen. I have no model open at all. Therefore, my browser is pretty empty, and I've got nothing that I can look at or see. So just to explain what we've got, our browser is giving us a breakdown of what we have in our model. So a design is typically made up of several components. So if you take your iPhone or your Android device, that particular product is made up of several hundreds, if not thousands, of individual components. And what the browser does is it will show us those different components and show us the different elements of our model. So for instance, if I come back here and open up that bike frame that we had earlier once again, give it a couple of seconds to load up, what you'll notice is the browser for the bike frame is much more detailed than the browser for an empty file, obviously because we've got many, many more components that make up this individual bike. Each one of those components has separate sub-areas. It might be a solid body. It might be some origin planes, which we'll learn about later on in the application training. It's just showing you how this model is built up, and then each one of those elements can be controlled or edited or worked on individually. So it's really just showing you everything that makes up this design or this product or this component or this idea, whatever it might be. And obviously then that will change depending on what you have open. The browser does have some areas that you will need to focus on as we go through the course. So firstly, we have the ability to say, okay, here's a component. If we hover over something, you'll notice in the model that it highlights that particular component. We can turn something off by clicking the eye, or on again by clicking the eye. We can also activate something by clicking this little activation button at the end, which tells Fusion that actively we want to be working on that component and making an edit to that component rather than the entire assembly. So we can have, the whole thing activated and editable, or even an individual component. It's much like opening a single part inside of the likes of Inventor or any other CAD application that you're using, and then seeing how we can edit that individually. You'll notice that when we make changes or select different things in here, that things happen around the screen. So firstly, it will hide certain components or make them transparent. Secondly, is we get some updating down here right at the bottom. So obviously we talked about our browser, and it's very clear that we have an area of model information or geometry, so we have a modeling area. But if we look just underneath that, it seems a logical time to talk about it, is we have this model history. And this is key. So Fusion is a parametric modeler. It understands everything that you're doing and remembers everything that you're doing. So everything has a parameter against it. So if you make a sketch with a dimension for its length, for example, that length will be remembered and it can be edited time and time again as you see fit. And everything that we do inside of Fusion stores in this feature tree that we can go back in time, if you like, to be able to edit something earlier on, or remove something or change something. So it becomes a very natural way of working. And if I may just demonstrate that really quickly to you by heading over into a new design, if I just show you that this feature tree, if you like, or this history, this model history, is empty, there's nothing in there. If I go ahead and create a new sketch, and just say, let's create a sketch on a plane. Again, don't worry too much about what I'm doing for the purpose of this, because we will talk through this in the later sessions. I'm just going to come in and say that I want to finish that sketch and maybe use my press pull to turn that circle into a cylinder. You'll notice that I have a sketch down here at the moment. If I finish a command, that sketch turns into a feature. At any point, I can go back in time by dragging this marker forwards or backwards, and I can also double click on any element of that history, and I can make a change. So I could grab this circle and make it much smaller, for example. If I then finish that, it will naturally go and update my model. Okay, so we have this sort of history that we can go back and chop and change or tweak as we see fit. So we have lots of files. We have a ribbon bar with context-sensitive menus. We have a browser which changes dependent on what we have open to show us the length and breadth of our product design, if you like. We have a modeling area, which we'll talk about in a bit more detail in a second. And at the bottom here, we have our history tree, or our feature history. Now, if we just jump back into our bike frame that we had earlier, just to give us something a bit more detailed on our screen, you can see within this bike frame the kind of history that we have on here is far superior to what we had inside of that simple part that I just started creating. And in that history, we have the ability to, again, come in and move that history marker to, make a load of changes. Keep your eye on the bottom of the spring there on the suspension travel, and you'll notice that, we can turn components on or off and literally go back in time. So we've talked through all of that. But how do I navigate my way around? Well, first and foremost, we can click different tools in different areas of our interface with our standard left-click mouse. But that's pretty obvious because it's a Windows application and that's how it works. How do we navigate around the model? How do we zoom in, zoom out, spin the thing around and physically navigate around? Well, again, it's all done with your mouse. There are some different options and some different ways in which you can do it. But you kind of want to get used to using your mouse as as a tool. So using it to drag the model around or zoom in and zoom out. And it's really not that difficult. So with any file that you've got open, firstly, zooming. Imagine that you're scrolling up or down your favorite web page and you want to be able to use that same functionality to zoom in and out. Well, it works just like that. So wherever you hover your mouse cursor, if you scroll your mouse wheel, it will zoom out and zoom in, okay? Wherever your mouse wheel, mouse pointer is positioned, will become your focal point or your center point for that zoom. So it's very easy to navigate around our model just by zooming in and out. Really straightforward. We hover our mouse and we zoom. So zooming's straightforward. Okay, but if I keep doing this for long enough, I'm eventually going to get to a point where I want to move around. So how do I move up, down, left or right around that screen? Well, inside of a CAD application, that's known as panning. And to pan, your best option is with that same middle mouse is to click it. So you'll find it's a button. So if you physically click and hold, you'll notice my cursor on my mouse has changed. And now I have the ability to move my mouse around the screen and move that model up, down, left and right. You're not actually moving the model, you're moving the camera. But this allows us now to mix zooming with panning, to be able to very quickly and very easily navigate around the different elements of our model. Come in and take a closer look at this assembly here. Maybe zoom into this thread down here to see what's going on. It makes it very, very straightforward to zoom and pan around your model. That process, by the way, is the same in any environment inside of Fusion. So it doesn't matter if you're looking at 3D objects or if you're looking at a 2D drawing. Zooming and panning work identical across all of the Fusion interface. Now, this is a 3D object, so it's very different to 2D. So as well as being able to move around and zoom in and zoom out, I also want to be able to spin around. I want to be able to pick this up and rotate it and have a look to see what's going on. And again, that's also your middle mouse button. So that's kind of your key, if you like, to all of these navigation types. The only difference is you've also got to hold down your shift key on the keyboard. So just above the control key is the shift key. It should say the word shift as well as have an up arrow on it. Normally just below your caps lock. If you hold that down and then hold down your middle mouse button, it will allow you to orbit. Now, this is usually a little bit unnatural feeling, especially if you're new to CAD or if you're new to 3D based applications. It's usually a bit strange doing those orbits for the same times. But once you're used to it, it's very straightforward. And actually it becomes very easy to start coming in and having a look at the different components that we want to in and around this particular component or in and around this particular product. So really straightforward to do. But some people do find that a bit unnatural. So there are other options for you if you find that a bit odd or maybe it's uncomfortable for your hand. We've got other options. So firstly, if you look at the top right, if it's a 3D view, like pretty much everything apart from a drawing in Fusion 360 is, we have this view cube. The view cube can be used to great advantage. So firstly, I can press the little house. It will take me back to a home view. I can click any corner on the view cube and it will navigate and spin the model to that corner. Likewise, any flat face or any edge. We can also click and hold that view cube to be able to orbit around. Okay. Now, to me, that actually feels unnatural because it's not the way that I've been doing it for many, many years. So you really want to be getting used to that shift and middle mouse. It's much easier, and it means that you can do things with your mouse in and around the model rather than keep coming up and down and up and down. And actually, over your life of using a design application, that's what you want to be doing. As little moving as possible, spending as much time in and around that model. But you have got the view cube there should you need it. You've also got some view options at the bottom of your screen, this little bar here. So if I click the orbit tool, that'll bring up an orbit constraint, and then I can click and hold my left mouse, so a normal mouse click in there and do a free orbit around the side, or hovering over any axis here will give you the ability to have a constrained or locked orbit, like so. Okay. That's actually really useful for the constrained orbit, so you can really get some very specific views if you should want to. Okay. We have the ability to look at, so if I click look at and click any flat face, it will look at that face, square on. Really useful if you're starting to do a sketch or a component design around that. You've also got zooming in and zooming out and some other different tools based on here. Again, try and get used to using your mouse if you can, because it's the way that you're going to want to use this moving forward. So once you've spent a few minutes getting used to how that works, you can also double click your middle mouse button. That will do a zoom extents or a zoom all. So that means no matter where you are in the model, just by double clicking that middle mouse button, that will zoom extents. So that will zoom to everything within your model. Doesn't matter how far out you're zoomed, he says, or how far in you're zoomed, it will do a zoom extents. So it will zoom out so you can see everything, or it will zoom in so you can see everything. Makes it very difficult to lose the model or lose where you are. If you ever can't find yourself again, just double click that middle mouse button and it will take you back to that default view, which is really useful. The only other two parts of the interface really that we need to talk about today are firstly the right click menu. The right click menu in Fusion is awesome. It's a little bit different to any other right click menu that you may have used because it's not a standard menu. We actually have this radial menu that pops up, which we won't talk about too much today, but it makes it very easy to be able to quickly do something. So if I'm in a new design, again up here, and I create sketches and say that I want to come in, on my right click menu, I've got lots of different options and I can remember where some of those options are. So if I just draw a quick rectangle, if I just right click and gesture my mouse to the right, it finishes the rectangle because it knows where that particular thing is on that right click menu. So you don't have to wait for it to pop up. We'll talk about that a bit more as we go on through the course. But again, I can flick my mouse to the top right to start a press and pull, and then flick it to the right to OK. So we've got something there that you can play around with and make your own. The only other thing is these palettes that pop up. So dependent on where we are and what tool we're using, we have different sketch palettes or different feature palettes or different constraint palettes. And these are giving us tools specific to the environment or the area that we are in. Okay, so we can come in and we can start controlling how an extrusion will happen. We can start controlling if there's a taper angle on that extrusion. We can start controlling how many instances of a pattern that we have or how our mirror is going to work. So those pop-ups will come up on the screen wherever they're required by a specific tool, and you can control firstly where they are within your model. They could be on a different screen, for example. They could be docked in a location. It's really up to you. We can completely control how this works and how we want them to work. We can minimize them, maximize them. They will pop up when you need them. And when you're finished with them, they will disappear. And really, that's kind of all I wanted to go through for today, is just talking about the interface, introducing you to the application, introducing you to the kind of things that it can do, and start talking you through how to find your way around a 3D model and how to find your way around the application. That's going to put you in good stead for the next 10 weeks or the next 9 weeks after today, where we're going to go through sketching and creating components with some of the features. We'll talk about some sheet metal and maybe even some surfacing tools. And then we'll go through all of the different tools that you need to go from design all the way through to manufacturing and drawing. So half-an-hour sessions every Monday, 11 to 11:30 on Fusion 360, taking you through all of those. If you miss one, they'll all be recorded and put straight onto our YouTube channel. So this one today will be straight onto our YouTube channel within the next few minutes once we're finished, and then you can rewatch it and go through it again should you need to. So look, that's kind of it for today. I hope that's been useful. It's just an introduction, as I said. Over the next few weeks, we'll get more detailed and we'll start doing stuff within the application, so really looking forward to that. But really all that's left to say is thank you very much for joining us. Stay safe, keep your families safe, follow the government advice and stay indoors unless it's absolutely critical or absolutely necessary that you can't. And yeah, look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you very much, and we will see you again.